The Symposium. Pictures of Lily. In a medium-sized art room located in the center of a vibrant Bohemian city, the students began to enter the class that was about to commence. The budding artists took their positions in the class and sat down in front of their easels that were set around the podium where the model would be on display, so that all the artists could clearly see them. Once the students had unpacked their art utensils, they all eagerly awaited for the model to enter the room. And at last, Lily the model came into the classroom and made her way through the curious and expectant crowd and gradually climbed up onto the stage to prepare herself for her artistic pose for the class ahead. Once on the platform, she removed her gown, so she was exposed in her naked, or natural state. She sat down on the chair that had been kindly provided by the school, so that she could be comfortable, and then she waited for the artists to ready themselves so as the painting could begin. As the lesson drew to its conclusion, the teacher inspected the paintings to see what artist had the best representation of the model that was sat upon the chair on the podium. And after a time, the teacher, with a great deal of thought and reflection, decided that all the paintings, although diverse, as they were all seen from their own unique perspectives from where the artists were positioned in the room, were all equal in essence. The bubble bath. If one could imagine beyond the superstrings, then eternity, and discover that they are infinite consciousness, and that it's all about the fun that is to be had from sharing, tolerating and respecting everyone's opinions, and to do our best to negotiate and form laws that are beneficial for all humanity. If God is seen metaphorically as a wise old entity having a bubble bath, and it decides once settled to create some bubbles, so it blows spirit through a straw into the soapy water, then into time and space through the superstrings, and there are many parallel worlds, universes and dimensions from the dense to the subtle that are created by God's breath, and there is a high probability that within time and space and the spirit and the flesh that infinite consciousness, or spirit, can be found within some, but not all of those God-given supernal bubbles. Those bubbles are finite, and for pleasure that are long forgotten when God has retired for the day, and has settled down for some much-needed sleep as it dreams of eternity. Is the multiverse just a plethora of bubbles created by God for pleasure for the duration of its bath, and that every dimension and or parallel world or universe is but a bat of an eyelid within the duration of the bath? So what would be the point of anything at all, other than that our existence brought God pleasure for a while in its bath, and that other than that everything was born from and destined to chaos and illusion? However, let us stay with the metaphor, but leave the personification of God behind and look to it as a creative infinite energy, not a person. And one must not judge God by its mistakes, for perfection is attained from spirit rising up from the icy depths of the dark on through the spirit and the flesh to balance its karma through humanity, as it creates spirit guides and Ethereans to take home and populate heaven. The graduation ball. Once upon no time, there was a beautiful hippopotamus that was trying on and deciding from a plethora of unique and spectacular evening gowns on what to wear to the evening ball at her graduation party. She tried one after another sequentially and simultaneously, and she loved all that she wore. So she did a little spin in front of the mirror and adorned herself with some dazzling jewelry, and then she replaced them with another as she utilized the wardrobe and its contents. She took approximately 7 hours, and on the 8th hour, she ultimately decided on what was the perfect outfit to wear, and she concluded that her God-given and or natural birthday suit would be absolutely perfect for the occasion, and so she exited her boudoir for the ball. The boating lake. Once upon no time, there was a boy, his family and his friends who on a day out at the water park stumbled upon an awesome boating lake. Upon its discovery, everyone was awestruck by the tranquility magnificence and splendor of the ambient majestic lake, and then subsequently, the boy, his family and his friends were all in the queue for the ride at the pier holding their tickets for their individual, dualistic and their group boating experience. One by one the boats came in, and sometimes as many as 3 or 4, and even more, and they were all filled with the enthusiastic customers, as they handed over their tickets of which they had gladly paid for, so as they can experience the ride. Whilst there, they were like dodgems at a fun fair as they intertwined and explored their potential, and all the probable anomalies and utilities that were there to enhance the overall experience of which they utilized. Then, when their time was up, their number was called over the PA system, and they all returned to the pier. They left the park and then the ride was over. The Symposium. My kind of God is the same as the biblical God, but with all the negativity taken out. However, it is not male or female, just pure consciousness, and is liberal, kind, caring and believes in rehabilitation, not punishment, if we do wrong or stray from the chosen path. There is a grand plan where all paths lead to home, and we all fit into the scheme of things. Yes, everything happens for a reason, but we do have options on what to do, say and will, with our feelings and assumptions that create the interface and the simulation. We work with God, and in so doing we add our vitality to the grand plan, which is not only to create ourselves from our experiences and assumptions, but to also take God from a passive state of being to state of actively being there. In short, God wants to discover itself, and it is through humanity that it gets to create and enter the eternal gates, which we do naturally with our understanding, belief, and our faith in God, for it is through the simulation that God self-actualizes eternal matter, that being creation, consciousness, and life eternal, and whatever you believe will become your eternal residence. Basically, when one speeds up one's mind and body during sports, or slows it down with meditation, one becomes self-aware with the former and aware of the self with the latter, which is appropriate, or in accordance with their actions. So we have not gone through 13.8 billion years of cosmic and corporal evolution, and only God knows how long before the Big Bang, or outside the four-dimensional playpen, within eternity, that we awaited the opportunity to change from non-existence to become existence. So it would be futile to deny the existence of the self, because active or passive you are not a sports god, or in union with God. You are just witnessing the polarities of your own self and its awareness. So if one wants to witness God, it is through one's intellect, creativity, and imagination, for we are extensions of our Creator. We have come down in our drones as of all life, so as we can create and populate through our understanding and virtuosity, heaven. I know that a lot of you feel the way that I do, and probably wish to say it in your own words. I think that it is not by accident that we have come together at this time, and if we put our thoughts together we could reach critical mass, and we could change the world for the better. I know that that was short and or brief, but it had to be said. She smiled broadly, then carried on. I think that when looking at free will and probability, that you need attraction to be added to it to give a true perspective about what is really taking place. What I mean to say is that we lay down a whole bunch of probable paths in the light with the powers that be, and then we forget as we come down and use our free will and the power of attraction to ignite certain paths that leads to our self-enlightenment and our own social development. The probable paths are probably seemingly endless, as they are diverse. However, it's what we choose with our free will that opens up the doorways or attracts specific destinies. She leans forward to take a sip from a glass of wine that Harry had previously passed to her. And having obtained it, she places it between her receptively open lips and gulps the wine from the glass before passing it on to James, who was her partner. And after she had held the wine in her mouth for a while to savor the flavor, and at the same time wagging her finger in the air to indicate that she was in mid-sentence. She finally gulps the wine down and says, "I think personally that the whole God thing is that we are all just one super complex God that is somehow dreaming the universe into existence so as it can live, entertain and express itself in the process, and the reason for all the confusion is because the sum of all its parts, that being the humans need to fulfill its needs and its assumptions to live a virtuous life and create a perfect future." Then Maria cut in as she began to speak. "I am a great believer in that. You know that we're all part of God's mind, and I must add by saying that on a personal level. Once one strips away the layers and realizes that they are part of the many-faced God, and that the whole of reality is nothing other than a projection of their own God mind, they soon reach the understanding that everything in the whole universe is fake or an illusion. When they reach this place, they then realize that life has no meaning. Yes, everything is pointless and finite. It is then when they begin to search for meaning once more by looking into the human aspects of their lives that they begin to realize that everybody is always searching for greener fields, while at the same time totally oblivious to all the little pleasures that adds love and reason to their lives. In the first place, it's a hug from your lover, listening to your favorite tune on the radio, sharing some time with your friends that make up the bigger picture, and it is then that we realize that the grass is as green as it can get, and that we can truly understand and enjoy the human aspect of this magnificence that we call life. We get to know God's plan through getting to know ourselves, and we get to know ourselves by tuning into what we do and love, and that is the point of our universal and divine existence. God may be just temporarily thinking everything into existence, but each and every one of us is alive in this very complex illusion. So, what if the world is a stage and you're in a play? Love is the meaning to life, so embrace it in all its forms and enjoy the ride. In a nutshell, life is a temporary illusion, but you are alive in it. This may seem pointless if one day everything can just blink out of existence, but the feeling that comes from love is real, so enjoy it while it lasts, and that can give you meaning in the now, if not forever. To coin a phrase, it is better to have loved and to have lost than not to have loved at all. He cleared his throat and he began to read aloud. Another point that I would like to stress is the creation or accident argument. For instance, not too long ago, they were saying that the universe was 15 billion years old, and now they say that it is 13.8 billion years old. Next, they say that the reason for the universe being like it is because it was imperfect just after the dawn of its creation, when the universe began to cool down. Because of its imperfect state, gravity was able to shape it, bringing about certain key cosmic changes that eventually ended up with life. Basically, it was like the three different states of water. When it is boiling, it is steam and is perfect. Then as it cools down, it forms into droplets of water, and this cools it further into a frozen state, and it becomes ice crystals. So as the universe cooled and it became less perfect, gravity could work its magic. As the dense parts became matter and the non-dense parts became empty space. They also throw creation or God out of the bathwater by suggesting that there are a number of parallel universes that did not evolve into molecules, stars, galaxies, planets, solar systems and life, and that our universe is a unique accident. Basically, our universe looks like it has been created, but it is just a freak occurrence, and when placed against all the other failed parallel universes, it is just odds on that our universe reacted and got created like it did. For instance, if you throw 2 dice, you will eventually get 12. Then, there is how life got here in the first place, and there are a few theories. It used to be that they could create life in a lab, So they hypothesized that the natural environment for life to begin with was hydrogen, methane, water vapor, ammonia, natural radiation, lightning and the heat from the volcanoes. But now they have moved on like they have with the age of the universe, and they have three theories. They say that on our world 3.5 billion years ago, rocks, water, carbon dioxide and hydrothermal vents in the ocean were the catalyst for life. Or they say that the molecules kept banging into each other until they stuck together and made a more complex compound that was life. Or that life came to us on an asteroid that crashed to the Earth from outer space. The truth is they just do not know. All they have is a few educational guesses, so you may as well stick with the Creator and be done with it. Some thinkers stress the point that the energy and movement of the cosmos is consciousness, and that everything is just thought, just like a dream. Could we be the mind of God? Surely God does not create and or think up its creation for pleasure. Surely it must have a goal, or we would be reduced to nothing other than a menial daydream. I suppose the real question is, does God know it is alive and thinking the whole universe and us into existence? I think to find the truth in that we must see if there is an afterlife, and if there is an afterlife, then surely there is a deeper meaning to life apart from what I have already mentioned. It seems that if one was to research that question, that we do indeed have an afterlife, and that we keep oscillating between this and a spiritual state, it then becomes obvious that we are taking our personalities, pleasures and a copy of our environments with us when we cross. So, this being the case, it seems that we are expanding the spiritual with our worldly experiences. Basically, God is creating earth from heaven and then heaven from earth. So, it seems that God is thinking up creation, and then through us it is creating an ethereal copy of all the good and bad things from it. So ladies and gentlemen, fill your lives with pleasure, peace, bliss and happiness, and know that we all have a part to play in the making of spiritual utopia. Then Adrian began to speak. To go with this, our bodies are made up of hydrogen, oxygen, carbon and nitrogen. That in turn is made up of protons, neutrons and electrons, which in turn are made up of quarks. Then superstrings, of which everything is governed if you believe in the superstring theory, or the quantum vacuum fluctuations springing up from the void in a self-conscious creative flux. In a nutshell, our bodies are nothing but cosmic energy, all dancing and interwoven. The best way to imagine it is that we are within, or absorbed into a cosmic space suit, so that we can have fun in our universe as we grow and evolve, and at the same time God can experience and express itself with our amazing existence. At physical death, we simply disassociate from the space suit and let go, and then we journey into the light, or spiritual heaven, and God only knows where we go from there. Then Craig spoke out. Before I begin, I must stipulate that I am going to resonate with what other people have said tonight, for I too wish to talk about creation and God, although I must stress that though it is similar, that it is in my own words. So I ask for your clarity and patience before I begin. I must say that whatever religion we concoct, that it is not going to make a difference, for whatever is happening with or without our desires. I think that we must reinvent God, but to do this we must have a brief look at the theist's reality first. God, creation, humankind, heaven and hell, the whole kit and caboodle are nothing other than a controlling mechanism. In a nutshell, God created the world, humankind, heaven, hell, and he also wrote some basic rules of which humankind must follow if they wish to get to heaven. This was and is for a lot of people still an ideal way of keeping order. The Bible is nothing short of a book of deontological ethics made practical by them being set within some fantastic stories. so we could live through them in fantasy. Basically, you learn through the literature what are the right and the wrong things to do in certain ethical situations, and this keeps you and everyone else in order and on the correct spiritual path. However, if you play up or question God's existence, you are told that you will be vaporized at death or sent to hell, and this, it is plain to see, as I have already said, is an ideal controlling mechanism. Heaven in the Old Testament was a place where God and all his angels resided, whereas in the New Testament for some, it is now a place for the entire God-fearing humans to reside to after their human lives have been spent. I must say that most people see heaven for the people as an abstract godly place in the ether or above the clouds, whereas in reality, or the literal sense, according to the Bible, it is on our earth, in our future after the judgment, when all the holy conformists are resurrected and returned as immortal souls into Eden, and all the rebels, or mutineers, are sent to hell. Let us not drop God altogether. Let us just drop God the controller, and replace it with God the overlord, and keep heaven not on earth in our future. Let's keep heaven as most of us feel with our intuition, after death and in the ether. Yes, let us drop God the controller, and or scaremonger altogether, for our God believes in rehabilitation, not retribution. Yes, let us keep the rest of the concept alive, and let us say that humankind can plainly see all the benefits that they could get from being good in this life and the hereafter with their self-consciousness. Let us keep the rest apart from. Let us say that God is not an ethereal man, but energy, and it is consciously dreaming itself and the universe into existence, and as Janet said, it is using life with their minds and senses to witness its creation, and create heaven with their environments and their living experiences. All the animals are in a sense recording heaven from the universe, with humankind at the top. Humankind is able to explore and self-explore, so it can record all the aspects of the universe, and also inner space, which places it at the top of the list. We are here to avoid suffering and pain and steer toward love, peace, kindness, pleasure and happiness, and become more caring towards others and witness our beautiful lives and creation, so as it can cross over with us and help us shape heaven, and that is the point of our existence. Humans, once they have finally evolved with all that I have mentioned, plus, with their creativity and imagination, they connect with God, and by making the right life choices they eventually get home. In the end, when the final day is done, they become as gods within heaven, living happily ever after. Let us see our earth as a testing ground, so that we can find inner peace and social and environmental harmony and reach a state of bliss, and from this we carry it all over into the afterlife, and we create heaven. Skip cut in and asked, could you run the basics of our soul's purpose and God by me again please? That was too deep to catch it all in one go. Okay, said then, and he repeated his philosophy with, so, in a nutshell, we are down here to be virtuous and to find love, peace, pleasure and happiness, and to be good people by showing tolerance, compassion, kindness, dignity, and respect toward others, and record our finest experiences with our minds and senses, and to make sensible life choices when opportunities or situations arise, and that is the way to heaven, which is made up out of the best bits of our environments from the universe. God is a creative energy that consciously dreams everything into creation. It remains aware, but asleep, dreaming, and is the overlord of all its creation. Skip thanked him, and then Andrew asked, okay, I can see what you mean, but do we get to keep our individual soul in heaven? Jake answered with, yes, each of us have centers. It is the place at which all our senses meet, we call it mind, and the mind feeds the soul, which is and is always our individual and one, free immortal spirit as one with all and everything. We have free will, and eventually we become our perfected soul, which is a soul that is made up out of all the best bits of our souls that we have used in our many lives on the planet, and we dwell within our and everyone else's, including the animals' environments, which becomes spiritual utopia, or heaven. However, we do not all possess the same level of consciousness in heaven. Just like on earth, we have to earn it. If one is spiritually aware on earth, one will move higher up the ladder from the beginning, so to speak. In a sense, or metaphorically speaking, God is dreaming that it is playing a game of chess with ourselves and nature. In the game, just like in chess, our part is that we start out as pawns and we work ourselves up to become queens, and then, with God, we go on to win the game. Afterlife. If we were low spiritually on earth, we are like worker drones in the light. We live our lives not that dissimilar to when we were earthbound, only that we would be immortal spirits. To advance, we either come back down, or we can progress within the light by raising our awareness over there. We do that by doing spiritual work to develop. We can become spirit guides to help those make it through life in the physical planes, or we work within the system in the light, and this raises our awareness, and then we can progress to reach our full potential, which is God consciousness. Yes, we become gods. Sukatin. I am currently reading a book on reincarnation that I find most stimulating, which for me proves there is a self and a hereafter, and if there is, then there could be a before or after time and space in an eternal infinite paradise. It was taken from the mouths of babes who remembered them. So would you mind if I spoke out? She asked, and everyone nodded in response. There was a girl who remembered that in her past life, that she was a boy, and she depicted not only the town, but also the actual house in which she lived. She recalled her parents' names, and that her dad used to work for the railways. She, or should I say he, used to have a dog called Muff, of which he used to walk within the local area. She named her two younger sisters, and said that she had a friend that was a couple of years younger than her. She remembered dying in which she was hit by a train, and before she was reborn she met God. She said that he was kinder than the pictures that he had seen on earth. When the parents checked it out, it all rang true apart from a discrepancy on the mother's first name, and of course they couldn't prove that she had met God. Then, there was a little girl that remembered being her mother's child from her first marriage before she was born. She remembered her mother nearly falling into her grave at her funeral, and that a yellow fluffy ball was buried with her, of which her sister had placed beneath her unbeknownst of her mother. Again, this all rang true, and the girl couldn't have known any of it, because her mother had divorced her husband and had married again, and they never spoke of their past, and she was born of the new father, and didn't know anything about her half-deceased sister. She also told her dad that his disabled deceased son from a previous marriage could now walk, and her father was dumbfounded, because again, he had never spoken of it. Then there was the Irish family that moved to England, and their young daughter remembered being a nurse in the hospital that was now a bank, and that she hated working nights. Her parents at first didn't believe her, but because she would not let it go and kept on insisting, they checked it out, and they found out that the bank had in fact been a hospital in the past, and they then believed in her strange tale. There was also the boy that remembered a weird clock on a church in Oxford, of which he had never been, from his past life. His mother was so taken aback by his account that she eventually let the boy lead her to it, because she had never been to the town, and she could not find it. The boy led her to the clock that had hands, but also a sundial attached to its face, which was indeed unusual, as the boy had said. He also remembered seeing Thomas Becket getting, in his own words, assassinated by some soldiers, of which he had no way of knowing, because his family was not into history, and he was yet to go to school. And finally, there was a young boy who remembered details of a past life, in which he was a German bomber pilot in World War II, and that he fatally crashed his plane into a building. He remembered his home, and that he used to collect and cut the logs for the house fires, and that his mother used to make a red soup for him to eat. He drew some badges that were later verified to be what German airmen wore, and he gave a vivid account of his aeroplane's cockpit. Again, like the last child, because of his insistence, his parents went to the local library, where they verified the badges and the accuracy of the pilot's cockpit. I'm only 40 pages in, and I really love it, and I cannot stop talking about it, of which you all now know. Then the attention was drawn to Susan, who had something to say on reincarnation, when she said that, "I would like now to speak about our soul's journey with some anecdotal wisdom taken from some case studies on reincarnation." I must say that when I went in search of the reincarnation question myself, that all the books that I read were scientific, and the most prolific writers on the subject were Ian Stevenson, James Van Praagh, and Dr. Brian Weiss. She took a deep breath, focused, and said, "There was a boy in Asia that remembered his past life, when he used to be better off, and he was not happy with it, as he was always complaining about his present poverty." He was so adamant that Ian Stevenson heard about it, and reincarnation was his field of expertise, and so he decided to give it some of his time. So it was then that he took the boy back to his former village, and he could pick people out of the crowd of whom he used to know in his last incarnation, and he got several of their names and professions to the T. He even went up to his old house, and he led the scientific crew to a secret hiding place under the floorboards, where he hid his money from his last life, and pointed out the fact that nobody except himself knew of it. I also remember reading a story of a French boy from another book, who seemed to talk incoherently with the doctors and the psychologists that they brought in to help. Essentially, they could not understand him or the situation. In fact, sense was not made until his parents got a linguist in, and it turned out that he was speaking in a Sri Lankan tongue, and he also used to rearrange his nappy like an Eastern man, and on top of that he climbed trees with ease. He told the linguist that he was from Sri Lanka in his past life, and that was why he rearranged his nappy like he did, for he used to wear his attire like that, and the reason of why he could climb trees with ease was because he used to climb coconut trees for a living in his last incarnation too. He went on to say that he was an avid gambler, and he showed the linguist his birthmarks on his body, and that these were the leftovers of his fatal wounds of his past life, where he had been shot and murdered for cheating at cards. He also told them his favorite alcoholic beverage that he used to drink was karak. I must stipulate that the boy was less than 5 years old, because usually when they get to 5 they forget their past lives and become the new persona for the current life that they are living, unless of course they are constantly reminded of it. Further, developmental psychology states that we do not get our abstract thinking caps on until we reach puberty, and so the children's stories could only be their past life memories. Then Luke interjected with, "There was a boy from an Arab state next to Jerusalem that had a terrible birthmark on his head, and because the Druze people believe in reincarnation, and go on to say that birthmarks can be fatal scars from one's past life carried over into the next life, they took the boy on a walk from village to village to see if he could remember anything from his last incarnation. The boy in question was 3 years old, and he could not remember a thing about his last time that he was on earth. However, when they got 3 villages in, the first 2 had drawn blanks. The boy began to get memories flooding through. He asked the elders of the village, who were gathered along with quite a crowd, because his presence and the men that were with him were causing quite the stir and assembly. They were asked if they knew where a certain man was, and the elders said that that man used to dwell in their village, but he had not returned home when he went to do battle in a neighboring state. The Druze are always doing battle somewhere or other, and a lot of them get lost in action. It wasn't that uncommon. The boy then said that he could do better than that, as he led the crowd to the man's house, and when they knocked on the door, it was the missing man that answered. The boy then claimed that he used to be his neighbor in his last life, and that the man had killed him with an axe, and that was the reason for his skull's birthmark. The man went white with both shock and horror as the boy led the crowd to a pile of rocks in the man's garden, and he told the crowd that that was where he had been buried, and they removed the stones and they found the dead body of a man that had what looked like a fatal wound to his skull. The boy then took them to another pile of rocks and got the crowd to dig into and remove them, and they found what the boy said was the murder weapon, which was the axe. The Druze, with this evidence, then took the law into their own hands and dealt with it as they saw fit. Then the seat swung back to Susan as she said, "There are also mind-bending stories of Burmese children who claim to be reincarnations of Japanese fighter pilots that were shot down over Burma in World War II. There was one girl who dressed like a Japanese man, and she believed that she was a man to back up her dress code and boyish behavior. A famous regression hypnotherapist, Brian Weiss, reckons, through his experience with his subjects, that whatever it is in this life that you oppose, that in your next life you are born into. So perhaps, because the Japanese pilots were fighting the Burmese, that is why they were reborn there, and it was not because it was the last location from their past life that dictated their current life and or culture to be born into. For instance, if you were a German Nazi in World War II, you would end up being an anti-Nazi or Jewish in the next life." The same writer goes on to say that there were a couple of men that would take turns on killing each other from one life to the next, and that was the way that they played out their joint karma with each other. One life Jack kills John, next life John kills Jack, in different wars and different locations throughout different chronological lifetimes on the planet. It makes me wonder what those two are going to do if we ever find world peace. Then Jake came back into the conversation as he added, "In a sitting with a medium, there were 3 boys that were inseparable in life, that were now deceased and in the light, and while alive they loved everything about the Vietnamese War. The boys had died tragically in a car accident, and when they came through the medium they said that it was a karmic debt that had to be repaid from a previous life, because they had killed a father and a daughter for fun when they were soldiers in the Vietnamese War. It was New Year's Eve, it was full moon, and they were all drunk, and they wanted to celebrate it by killing some Vietnamese people. They found some potential victims who were in a car, and they got out of their jeep and began taunting and shooting at them, and the car had ended up in flames and a father and a daughter were killed. The boys in this life had been in their jeep driving too fast when a car had come at them in the opposite direction, causing them to swerve and crash into a telegraph pole, and the jeep burst into flames and killed them. The girls who were in the car came out of the accident unscathed, and it turned out, according to the deceased boys that were speaking from the afterlife, that they were the reincarnated Vietnamese father and daughter whom the boys had killed in their previous life. The medium heard later that when one of the boys' mothers who was at the sitting and who got the message had visited the girl's mother, because she knew them, for the girls had attended the same school as her son whilst he was alive, and she told her about the message and the accident. The mother said that the 2 girls were fascinated with Vietnam and that they wanted to visit it. She also said that they put fire ropes out of their bedroom window in case a fire broke out in the night, which was probably carried over from their past life tragedy. Next Vic took the seat and he said, Blavatsky, with her Theosophical Society, that was a combination of theosophy, science and philosophy of the late 19th century, tried creating a unified world theosophy. She believed that the spirit separates from the astral body at death, which is only temporarily in existence, for eventually it dissolves and dissipates once they have crossed over into the afterlife, and the spirit reconnects with God. Swedenborg took it further, whose view is that you live your life and then you die, and after death you live in a zone that resembles your physical world, only it is created by your thoughts. He does state that everyone that thinks like you do, or is in your mind frame, also shares the same zone, and that if your mind changes, that you change zones too, and you can see and meet others from, or in that new mind zone. There one will stay imagining their world and existing within it until one recognizes the fact that one is somehow cut off from both the physical and spiritual domains. It is when one recognizes that they are in a dream world that they eventually ask for help. At that the angels come down and lift them to spirit. Next one lives a life in pure spirit until one is ready to begin a new incarnation and get back to their spiritual karmic journey.